What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show here on Sherdog.com, and I am back with another betting show as MMA returns after a week of a hiatus. If you missed last week's show, please check it out. I went back over my bets for the year, kind of at the halfway point of the year, although someone told me today it's actually another month until the halfway point of the year, and I'm like, is it? But anyway, we're here. And some of those bets, I predicted the champions for the year. I gave a few bets for the year. Plus, I gave a few more bets for the rest of the year as well. So if you haven't checked that out yet, please do check it out. Let's go over the bets as well. So for the week before, because we had another very, very, very good week, and I'm absolutely delighted with it. We've been on some run the last 3 weeks in a row. The Flyers have hit every single week. We had a plus 600 bet, a plus 600 bet, and a plus 575 bet from last week, which is absolutely fantastic. That bet was Alexander Hernandez winner. It feels like so long ago that these fights have kind of gone out of my memory, but like I kind of slightly reviewed them last week, but that bet did hit anyway. I had another flyer. I went for two flyers that week, if you remember correctly. Mackenzie Dern at plus 1800 to get the knockout. Anyone who watched that fight knows that's a pretty good bet, to be honest, because she almost did it so many times. It didn't hit though. The Nick Fiore bet, I was wrong on that one. Chase got a good win there, but the other two bets straight up I got correct. Mackenzie Dern minus 177. Looking back on that, what a price that was. An absolute shellacking of a performance there against Angela Hill. And Lupi Godinez minus 150 got the win as well. Maybe not her best performance, and maybe the fight didn't go exactly the way I predicted either. So that's one, usually I'm coming on here and giving the hard look story. That's kind of a good look story, I think, there more than anything else. So the pick was good. The reasoning maybe not so good. So I'll take that one. The record as we stand right now, 2 of 3 last week, obviously, on the bets, and 1 of 2 on the flyer. So we're 33 for 68 overall, which is not too bad, just over 50%, and 7 of 18 on the flyers, which I think is absolutely incredible, to be honest. Like, I think I only hit like 3 or something all of last year, and to hit 7 already, 5 months into this year is pretty incredible. So I'm absolutely delighted with that. And like, if we can hit another 2 or 3 of those flyers towards the end of the year, I'm calling that a win anyway. I'm calling that a win. So pretty happy with that. So yeah, let's get into it. And as I said, check out the other betting show as well. 1 or 2 of the bets happened, 1 or 2 of the bets didn't. 1 or 2 bets, like, one of them was John Jones and Francis Ngannou, so that's obviously not going to happen. So we gave a few bets for the end of the year as well, and even a few fights have been announced, I suppose, since that recording 10 days ago or so. So maybe we do a 3/4 way of the year one as well. The next time there's no fights, which doesn't happen that often. I was actually just looking at the list of UFC weekends here up on Sherdog.com, and we've June 3rd, 10th, 17th, 24th, 1st of July, 8th of July, 15th, 22nd, 29th, 5th of August, 12th of August, 19th of August, and then we start from there. So from now until the 19th of August at least, and I'm sure they haven't announced the fights up till then, every single weekend. That's like, okay, we don't get a Saturday night for the whole summer, I guess. All right, that's fair enough. And like, there's actually some very good cards coming up, to be fair. Now, there's been some very bad UFC cards recently, but we have, Nunes versus Aldana. We have Topuria versus Emmett. We have Volkanovski versus Rodriguez, Aspinall and Tybura. Maybe not a massive fight, but it's on in London. Poirier Gaethje as well, and Sterling O'Malley, I suppose. Some very good stuff in there now, and I left out the bad stuff, but I don't want McMahon coming after me. But I thought, actually, just on that quickly, maybe before we start, and maybe this isn't the topic so much for a betting show, but it is, because we talk about the bets all the time, and it's funny, you come on here and like, I'm picking out my bets, and you, as I said before, what I always like to do, picking out my bets, look at the obvious ones, look at like the fighters I know before I have to do any research or anything on them. And look at that bet and think, oh, that could be a good bet, then watch a couple of fights and stuff. There's a lot of fights recently, even this card to a certain extent. There's lads like in the co-main event, or in the, sometimes even in the main event, or the third fight from the top, and you're thinking like, who is he again? Let me go back and watch it. Who did she fight in her last fight? Who did she? And before, and I'm someone who does this every week. I'm coming on, I can't fake it. I'm doing it every single week. I'm watching the fight. But you just, me anyway, I just can't remember him as much. There's just so much, and it's very hard to do it. I think McMahon are kind of coming out saying, oh, what's bad? I'm like, well, it's not so much necessarily that it's bad. It's not that the fighters are bad or anything like that. There's just so much of it that it's impossible to keep a hold of in terms of your memory, but also to decipher between what's good and what's kind of not good. And I think that's kind of what he's fallen into there, because like I feel like I've really tried in all my work to decipher what's good in the UFC over the last while, and not what's good, but what's like elite. And there's very, very few top level elite cards. There's a lot of very, very good fights, but there's very few that you say like you go through the whole card, or you even go through 3 to 4 fights of the card and say this is top level, like that person could be a champion. Even some to a certain extent in cards like this, like, and the difference between that and cards like this is you're looking at lads like, can this guy even be a top 15 fighter in some cases? And that makes the betting it gives you opportunities, absolutely, but it also gives you like it's harder to, especially when there's up and coming fighters and they haven't that much tape on them or they haven't that much experience, it's hard to know how they're actually going to perform. So it's a thing you definitely have to decipher when you're looking at bets. Now it's very hard to decipher the top level fights as well, because a very good skill set versus a very good other skill set is not an easy one to get through either. But I think a lot of people, and myself included, when you look at betting and you look at how you're picking your fights, the quality of the card definitely matters, because I think you do look at it a different way. Like if someone has jiu-jitsu is a good example, right? Jiu-jitsu is a good example. Very rare, unless someone has like a massive dominance in all areas or a massive wrestling dominance anyway, jiu-jitsu very rarely is the finishing maneuver, let's say, in a top level MMA fight. But at a lower level, it often is. And you'll have seen, I guarantee you, since like the oversaturation, but since the ESPN deal came in, I guarantee you there's a lot more finishes by submission than there was in like the sweet spot of the period beforehand, where we had a lot of very good mixed martial arts, but the fights were kind of just getting to a level where they're every weekend. So that's a thing to keep an eye on. But anyway, we'll get straight into it here. And funnily, I have no finishes on this week's bets. I have none. So actually, I don't know if people are looking at it or not. And this is another thing to look at with the betting. I'm here recording this on a Wednesday evening, right? And I usually do a little bit earlier. The betting odds come out, and I love to be prepared. I get my stuff recorded very quickly. There was no betting odds out in this until Wednesday evening Irish time. And still I'm here. I don't have all the betting odds. Some of the fights, the knockouts and the submission, there's very few betting odds out. Like the win and loss money line betting odds were out, but the rest weren't. And I think that is a thing you're going to see more of for these cards. Like the offering of betting odds even is not going to be as early and as big as it is for the big cards as it once was. So another thing to keep in mind of. Right, let's get into the bets for next week. I have the first bet and the last bet from the UFC, and the middle 3 are from KSW, because I really like this KSW card, and there's a few very interesting cards. Like this KSW card is by far and away bigger and better than the UFC card, without a shadow of a doubt. 50,000 people there, title fights on the line, top quality fighters, Pudzianowski, madness like that. Khalidov, one of the best fighters. Like, to me, the best matchup this week, without a shadow of a doubt, is Marian Ziolkowski against Salahdine Parnasse, the most high-level fight by a country mile, I think, is that one. Although the UFC main event is pretty good as well, but I have a bet on that as well. Let's get into it. So, first bet of the week. I honestly, I'm not too sure on this one, but I like the price, right? So I'm going for Jim Miller to win here in over in the UFC. This is on in the UFC Apex as well. We all love the UFC Apex. I can't wait for the Ari Helwani tweet. There's 45,000 people at KSW and there's 45 people at the UFC Apex watching this. But the first bet anyway, Jim Miller to beat Jared Gordon at plus 140. I'm going for this for one big reason, I think, right? Jim Miller, you look at him, right, and he's gotten to a certain age now, and when people get to a certain age in MMA, there's usually like a pretty significant drop-off in you know, their ability and what they can do and how they can move and all of that. And look, there's been definitely a bit of that from Jim Miller, but maybe not as much as you would expect. You know, he's talking about fighting on UFC 300 and all of that, and I'm sure it's not, you know, completely beyond the realms of possibility. But the one thing I noticed when you look back at his recent fights, and even just rather even before looking at the fights, you look at kind of the record, and I think like his last 4 fights are a good example of it. He beat Eric Gonzalez, Nicholas Mata, Cowboy Cerrone, and he lost to Alexander Hernandez. What I think the difference was in that Hernandez fight compared to the others was that Hernandez is just kind of a very good athlete. I don't think Alex Hernandez is the best fighter in the world, although when he turns up, he can be a very good fighter and he can be a dangerous fighter, and he's one that I always looked at to like, okay, you know, he has that athletic ability. Can he go on and do something even more if it all came together? And I do think he is one of those guys that can happen. Whereas the others, they have, not to say any of those are bad athletes, but Miller was able to beat all of them and finish all of them. And what I think the reason for that is, and maybe I'm drawing a conclusion here to kind of benefit my analysis or whatever, and, you know, there's always the possibility of that. I think Jim Miller is like a little bit of an underrated athlete, to be honest. Like, it's funny, I was watching Roosevelt Roberts on Tough last night, and Jim Miller beat him, and he's a big, tall guy for the weight. And some of the other guys, say the likes of Scott Holtzman, Vince Pichel, Joe Selecki, who have beaten him down through the years, you know, are maybe not the most skilled guys in the world, but all kind of good athletes. And Charles Oliveira, even back in the day. You look, so, and I'm getting to the point here. You look at Jared Gordon, and I think what Jared Gordon is just a very good, well put together technical fighter, or a fighter who tries to be technical. I don't think he is the athlete that some of the guys named there are. Definitely not an Alex Hernandez and others. Now, not to say he's not a better fighter than them, right? But I don't think he's as good an athlete as them. So I think that immediately draws Jim Miller a bit of an advantage, or draws the fight closer than someone else maybe of Gordon's skill set. That if they let's say you put Gordon's skill set with Alexander Hernandez's athletic ability, you have a very good fighter altogether. Or not even maybe his skill set, but his work ethic and his ability to stay in there, and his chin and his toughness and all of that, and his intelligence as well. Like, look what he did to Paddy Pimblett in that fight. That was a lot of intelligence led to that. So I think it's a very close fight. But the reason I'm going for Miller is that I think if this kind of claws in and becomes a close fight, and Jared Gordon tries to do what he did say against Pimblett, or he does in other fights, to get a slight advantage in an area, I think it's going to be tougher to do that against Jim Miller. Like the way he put Paddy Pimblett against the cage for 5 minutes of the third round. I don't think Jim Miller is going to allow that necessarily. And if he does put him there, I think Jim Miller is used to fighting kind of stronger, better athletes who, unless they are very, very, very good, they're not going to control him in that sort of area. And Miller will either, go down, turn the position, take you down maybe, or dominate from that position, even if it's just kind of a transition to where he can get out and where he can win the fight. I think he's also as smart as Gordon is. I think Miller is very smart as well, and won't fall into a lot of the traps that Gordon lays for him. And if he does early, or if Gordon has laid good traps early, I think Miller has the ability to adjust as well. So as I said again, I do think it's a close fight. I will get to the betting later on of the fight to go to, say, a decision or something like that. I like the fight to go to a decision, but I'm going to go for Miller here. I think there's a little bit of fuel left in the old tractor yet, and I'm going for Jim Miller in the first bet of this week. All right, the second bet of the week, and this is another old dog for the long road. In Pudzianowski versus Artur Szpilka. And I'm going for Szpilka to win at plus 180. I just think it's a very, very good price on him, to be honest. Like, you look at Pudzianowski. So if people don't know Artur Szpilka, he fought, or he boxed even against I think Klitschko and was it Deontay Wilder as well? He was, very high class boxer, fought to a very high level, and now he's coming over to MMA and he's fighting against the former, I think, 5-time world's strongest man, Mariusz Pudzianowski, who has become a very good MMA fighter over the years. Knocked out Michel Materla 2 fights ago. Fought against Khalidov last time out, did get knocked out, but still to be up and fighting at that level is very, very good for a guy who, at his age, who's come over from strongman, is a massive, massive achievement. I was surprised to see Pudzianowski's the favourite, I won't lie. And the reason for that is, the reason he's favourite is because people think he's very strong. He's going to go over, take him down and beat the boxer. And he very well might, right? But I just think over the last while, Pudzianowski's found it harder to do that. He did it against Khalidov for a second, but wasn't able to hold him there, right? Against Materla, he knocked him out. I don't think he'll be going out trying to knock out Artur Szpilka. And if he does, I think it could be a big, big issue. But what you have to do when you're fighting against Pudzianowski, unless you're Khalidov, because Khalidov is so good that he doesn't really need to. Khalidov can fight with him in any area and win the fight. But I think what Szpilka will do here is just avoid him. Just try to avoid the takedown. Try to avoid any sort of grappling, any sort of clinch, as much as he possibly can. Use his footwork, move away, and just try to catch him with a few shots. And if he can do that early, or even if he does get taken down, he can survive the first one, I think it's a massive advantage for Szpilka. Look, this to me is a fight where if Pudzianowski does not finish it within the first 2 minutes, that Szpilka will win it, I think. Now, it remains to be seen as well if how much of an MMA fighter he is, how far he can go, basically how he can do everything. But I'm banking on a guy with that level of boxing to be able to have enough footwork to get away from a big lumbering guy like that, move away for 2 minutes until he tires out a little bit, and then jab him up and hit him. Pudzianowski is not going to be able to take the shots of Szpilka if he can land a few. He really can. He wasn't able to take Khalidov shots. Now Khalidov is able to be a lot more positive and a lot more I suppose open with his shots because of how good he is as a fighter, and he knows he's an MMA fighter, and he's not completely against getting taken down, as Szpilka I'm sure will be. But I think if he's smart enough to open up with a few shots after the initial burst, I think he'll get the finish here. But just him straight up, -180, I like that bet and go for Artur Szpilka. All 5 bets this week are plus money. Now, come to next week and are going to be 0 from 5, but that's the one I'm willing to take. The next bet I'm going for bet 3. I'm very much betting on price here because I think this is a 50-50 fight, and I'm going for the aforementioned Marian Ziolkowski. Marian Ziolkowski. I love the way he's the hardest second name in the world to pronounce, and I got the first name wrong, and it's Marian. But he is taking on Salahdine Parnasse, and he's +163. Now, as I said, toss of a coin, a real toss of a coin. If Parnasse was +163, I'd be giving him here, but he isn't, and that's why I'm giving Ziolkowski. Now, I watched a good bit of tape on both of these. If you haven't seen the preview, please check it out. I went into even further depth there, but I just think this is going to be a really, really, really good boxing match, a kickboxing match, striking match. Marian is just so flowy and light on the feet. I mentioned in the preview, he reminds me a little bit of John Jones. He uses his length very, very well. He can pick lads off. He is constantly, and even more so than John Jones, obviously it's either the lower weight class, he's constantly doing stuff. He's constantly throwing, constantly jabbing, constantly kicking, constantly switching stances. Just a very hard guy to fight against. Parnasse, on the other hand, is a lot less movement, but a lot more kind of, not more intelligence, but a very intelligent fighter. Slick defensively, and he frustrates people because of that. And then I mentioned in the preview, he opens up for his striking after that. When he frustrates you, he forces you to move, he forces you to do something, and then he kind of picks you off. Against Marian, that's going to be tougher because he's going to be, as I mentioned, he's going to be doing stuff all the time anyway. So I think Parnasse, by the nature of how Ziolkowski fights, he's going to have to adjust how he fights. And I think he's at his best when he's fighting the way I just mentioned. And to adjust to that, to fight someone else who's, Parnasse is going up in weight as well, it's going to be very, very tough. Now, can he rise to the occasion? Can he do it? Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. I think this is going to be a razor thin, a close fight. But the way I'm just going here, and as I said, if it was the other way around, I'd probably be picking Parnasse. But the bigger guy, the guy who I think maybe the difference here might be, right? I think both guys can hit hard and maybe rock the other guy. I think Marian might be able to do it slightly more often if Parnasse can't pick him apart all the time. Because, as I said, what Parnasse preys on is the mistakes of other people because of his defensive ability and because they attack him maybe in a similar way a lot of the times. Ziolkowski will not do that. He'll attack him in different ways all the time, and he's going to be harder to time and harder to call. Really, it's going to be very, very tough for Parnasse to know what's coming next and to know what to hit him with next. So for Marian, I think if he can land 3 big shots throughout the fight, 4 or 5 big shots throughout the fight, I think it might be his. It might be his. And obviously you need to stay defensively sound when you're fighting Parnasse, because he's going to fight in a different way and try to, or be forced to try to hit you more. It's a fascinating fight. Even if forget the betting on this one, just go and watch it. Trust me, this is high level stuff. If you're going and watching this fight as well, don't look at this as like some up and comers fight or some prospects fight or whatever. These lads will be good in 5 years. These lads are world level right now. Trust me on that. Go and watch them. There's some of their fights on YouTube right now. Go over to KSW 83 on Sherdog. Copy and paste their names and look them up on YouTube. These guys are top level. Like Salahdine Parnasse should have been signed by a Bellator or a UFC a couple of years ago. They should have paid him a load of money to be the star in France, but they didn't. And KSW do pay him a lot of money. And they're dead right to do, and fair play to them for doing it. A guy like that should be paid a lot of money. But he could be a star in France right now, but he's doing his stuff in KSW, and fair play to him. And this is going to be a brilliant fight. A brilliant fight. Right, my fourth bet of the week is a trilogy fight. They're 1-1, and it's massive. And it's Scott Askham versus Mamed Khalidov. And my bet here, I'm not picking either fighter. I'm picking this fight to go to decision at plus 130. Now, it's, if you look at their first 2 fights and you look at the way they went, the first fight went to a decision, so maybe I'm right there. The second fight ended in 36 seconds, so maybe I'm wrong there. So we'll see how this one works out. Now, the first fight was in 2019. Askham won that. The second fight in 2020, and Khalidov won that in 36 seconds. Remember that flying switch kick, knockout of the year, in my opinion. I think a lot of people's opinions as well. Askham hasn't fought since then, which is, I suppose, a worry if you're an Askham fan or if you're Askham himself, but the pandemic was a big issue and all of that. Khalidov has fought twice since. He got knocked out by Roberto Soldic in the second round, and as I mentioned earlier, he got the knockout win over Mariusz Pudzianowski in their fight at the end of last year. So he has been more active, although still only like October 2020, December 2021, December 2022. Not that active, but he did fight 6 months ago or so not too bad. The reason I'm going for this to go to decision, I went back and I watched both of their fights. Now, the first one I found kind of a grainy stream of it. It was hard to find. The second one, it's only 36 seconds, so you can see the knockout on YouTube or whatever, or on Twitter or wherever you want to see it. I think the first fight will lead to the first fight, and the second fight will lead to the third fight. What I mean by that is Askham was able to get a good bit of wrestling in that first fight. And when you get knocked out in 36 seconds against the guy, you're probably not going to want to strike with him early, at least, in the next matchup. And I think that's the smartest thing that you could possibly do. Askham has been out in ATT again training. We know the level of wrestling that's there. A lot of his striking as well. His style isn't designed, I don't think, to fight a guy like Khalidov on the feet the way he did in the first fight anyway. Because he's very willing to throw, right? Very willing to throw. And that's grand when you're, like, as I said with Jim Miller and Jared Gordon earlier, like, and you can put this for both of them, they're very willing to throw against guys their level. Like, if they rise up a level, like what way do they lightweight, let's say they fought a Michael Chandler or something, that could be big trouble for both of them. You know, big trouble. Justin Gaethje, a nightmare for both of them, because they're used to people throwing that many shots, and they're going to throw back at them, right? And that's kind of what happened, I think, to Askham in the second fight necessarily. Now, the first fight, it was obviously more wrestling and things like that, and Pudzianowski, Khalidov wasn't able to catch him as much. I think this one, even though the way Khalidov kind of says, see, the way Khalidov fights, he almost draws you in to want to hit him, because he's kind of wide open down the middle with his karate stance, and the left hand is always an issue against southpaw. Someone like Askham who can fight who fights out of the southpaw position. He kind of draws you in with that, you know? He almost draws you, oh yeah, go on, hit me right down through the middle there, and I'm going to crack, gone. Throws these axe kicks, big kicks like that. And I think he's going to try to get the fight into that position, right? No matter what happens. And I think Askham is going to try to keep the fight away from that, no matter what happens. And Askham, I think, will get takedowns in this fight unless it ends in the first 30 seconds again like the last time, or first minute like the last time. He will get takedowns. But when, let's say he gets a takedown in the first 30 seconds, the fight goes to the end of the round. The next round, I think Khalidov is going to be a lot more defensive, I think, on the feet to try to avoid the takedown, which is going to leave him less likely to get the knockout, if you want to put it that way. And leave Askham less likely to be, the phrase I use for Askham is willing to throw. He won't be willing to throw if Khalidov is kind of outside of a distance. Like, Askham, I don't think is going to reach in if Khalidov is kind of outside of that distance, trying to avoid the takedown. So we could very well have a sort of staring match there for a while, but I don't think that'll last long, especially with 45,000 fans in there. And the one to close the distance, I think, will probably be Khalidov, and that might get him taken down. So, like, I'm probably going for Askham to win the decision here, but not necessarily, because if Askham catches a shot coming on the way in, maybe lands on the bottom himself, but pulls guard or whatever and survives, I could see something like that happening too. Or if he does get a takedown, maybe Khalidov can get around, get on top, and land a few shots himself. You know, I think it's a fight that is going to be, it's probably not going to be as action-packed maybe as you would expect, but I think it's going to be a very competitive, scrambly type of fight with a lot of tactics in it. And when that happens, I think those fights usually go along, especially with two guys who fought each other before, know each other, and there's so much back history there. So that fight to go to decision plus 130 is my next bet of the week. Right, the flyer bit here, and this flyer isn't as big as they have been in the past. As I said, because like I had to get the show recorded, and all the betting odds are not out there, so it's only a plus 300 this week flyer, but we'll call it a flyer anyway. And it's Amir Albazi to win by decision. Now, the reason I'm going for this is because I watched Albazi, and it's funny, like, from my memory, I and maybe this is to go back to the first point as well about Mick Maynard and about all the cards. And look, this does happen because when you go back and you watch fighters, you do get a different look at them. But I had Albazi down as a more of an action, and not necessarily an action fighter, but more action, let's say, than what I went back and I watched this time. Like, he is kind of a wait and see fighter, a little bit like Parnasse, but more of obviously a wrestler than a striker like Parnasse. But he kind of waits for you to make that decision, waits for you to make that mistake, and then kind of pounces. And he is very good at it, to be honest. Now, I think he might run into a similar problem that Parnasse does, actually. Like watching that Alessandro Costa fight. Early on, like Costa didn't really put up much of a fight, to be honest, but he didn't do much. And this is kind of what I'm talking about in the last fight as well. When you don't do much and your opponent's waiting on you, it can be kind of just a staring match for a while. And that's kind of the way the fight was here until Albazi was able to get the fight to the advantage. Until he was able to get that. He landed a beautiful straight right. I think that was the second takedown, where his straight right down through the middle got him to the ground and got on top. It was a knockdown takedown, if you want to put it that way. And in the second round, he did, or was it maybe the third round? The second round, third round, he opened up a little bit more and was able to get like the straight takedown in that fight. So he's a very patient game. A very, very patient game. And it's good, to be honest, because if you have any deficiencies in any area as well, he hides them very well. But he showed in that fight he has power. He's very good on the ground. And we all know he's good on the ground. But the reason I'm going for him and I'm going for him to win a decision here is I think there's going to be a lot of that as well. I really do. And I do think I think Kara France is somewhat of a patient fighter as well. So I don't think this is going to be a classic, to be honest. I think there's going to be a lot of patience, a lot of waiting. Eventually someone will have to do something. And like, what are the chances? And it comes down as simple as this to me, right? What are the chances of Kara France actually getting the big knockout? And what are the chances of him, conversely, going for the big knockout and getting taken down? I think the latter is way more likely than the former. Now, we've seen Kara France do it before, don't get me wrong. He's a very, very good fighter, and there's a reason why this is a close decision. Plus, his wrestling is very good, and he's very, very much improved, and his jiu-jitsu and all that. I've been very, very impressed with Kara France over the last couple of years. But in a fight like this, where one guy's kind of waiting is for a period of dominance, and one guy's waiting maybe is for a knockdown or knockout, it's and especially at 125, a lower division, it's way more likely that the guy who's looking for 2 or 3 minutes of dominance on top with ground and pound, with a few submissions maybe, is going to get it over the guy who's looking for the knockout. Now, that's, as I said, that's not always the case, and maybe not the way this fight will go, and maybe one round it'll go that way and one round it'll go the other way. But I think Albazi's kind of designed a fighting style for 5 rounds as well. I think that will benefit him. I think his style will still be very good in the 4th and 5th round. And I think even if he loses the first round, he's a guy who can win 2, 3, 4, and 5. And that's basically simply enough the reason I'm going to give him. I think he's very smart. He will know, he will be. And a lot of guys as well, look, a lot of guys are smart to know you can't walk into the big right hand or whatever it is of Kara France. But not everyone has the moxie or even the confidence to avoid it, to be patient enough to avoid it for maybe a round or 2 rounds. I think Albazi has. And I think that'll be the key to this fight. And that's the reason why I'm giving him to win. So that is that's the 5th and final bet of the week. Albazi to win by decision at plus 300. All right, let's look at some of the other prices. We'll start off with that fight. Albazi and Kara France. They're both minus 110 straight up to win the fight. Fight go to the decision is plus 130, minus 175 here. Kara France to win inside the distance is plus 275. So if you want to go for a couple of bets there to back up your first one, that mightn't be a bad one. So I think one of the two of them is probably going to happen. Albazi decision or Kara France maybe to get the fight finished inside the distance. The co-main event apparently is Alex Caceres against Daniel Pineda. Caceres minus 175, Pineda 145, plus 145. I would probably go for Caceres there, but again, he's another guy you don't know how he's going to show up and how he's going to look. But I will go from there. Tim Elliott, he's a big favourite at minus 175. He's had a tough time